Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
Gappers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. Today I have a special guest in the studio with me. I have Holly Baxter. Hello, Holly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Heather.
So let's just jump right into it. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone about you?
Gosh, the elevator spiel. I'm so bad at this because there are so many things that I do. It's hard to make it short-winded, so I'll try to be brief. Yes, my name is Holly. I guess my background is for educational purposes. I have a Bachelor of Food Science Nutrition and a Master of Dietetics. So my love nutrition and have grown up very sporty. When I was young, I did a lot of track athletics and basketball, did all the fun kid things. And I guess I got to the point where I had to decide, do I take a career in like athletics or do I take more, thinking about my career from an educational perspective? I opted for that. And especially being in Australia, I think sports for women just doesn't exist. So I think the better career outcome was to go and get an education. So I still continue to do a lot of sport when I was, going through college. But my time was very limited. So I found I couldn't do, some of the team sports that I loved. And I just found myself in the gym a lot more, trying to remain, fit and strong, all that good stuff. And I guess after graduating, I kind of felt like I was ready to take on the world and spend a little bit of time as a clinical dietitian. So for working in a hospital setting, and then kind of realized that environment was not the environment that I enjoyed. I think I personally love people that are really motivated to change, that are interested in their health and want to be fit and strong and live for a really long time. And that was just not the type of person I think that was in that clinical environment. So I went on and opened up my own practice. I also owned a gym with my ex-partner at the time. And did a lot of stuff, I guess, with athletes and people that were generally really sporty. So from there, I actually started working more with people that were in, physique type sports. So it was something I'd never even known about, but I started working with these types of clientele and I got into bodybuilding myself. So unfortunately, it came from a place of insecurity, came from a place of needing validation, came from all kinds of places and all the wrong reasons, which is interesting to reflect on now as I have kind of grown through all of that. But unfortunately, I struggled with an eating disorder for about 15 years. I had bulimia, binge eating disorder very early on, and anorexia. And then it kind of stuck with me through most of my adult life. So now, finally, at the age of 35, I can say that I have successfully recovered. Although I don't know whether everybody fully heals. I think there's always learning opportunities and places for us to grow. But that has only happened really in the last 5 years. So I spent the better part of my late teens, all of my 20s while working, as a dietitian and while working as a professional physique athlete, really struggling with my sense of self, my identity. Perfectionist was really, really high in the, people pleasing, like all of these kind of qualities that were not serving me at all. And I struggled with depression, had a lot of anxiety, all the things. And I finally got to a point where I wanted to change. I was so done. And here we are about 5 or 6 years later, in a very different place and happier and freer than ever. So yeah, that's obviously nothing about what I do for my business now, but that's kind of a little bit about my story.
Well, thank you very much for being so open and honest about that. Well, I'm you, just not with the awesome physique that you have. No muscles over here. But yeah, anorexia, bulimia, all that stuff. So how did you, and you talk about like, I call it the hamster wheel of hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're all on the hamster wheel of hell, and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but you can't jump off the hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get there? Because I know, like, my cousin was a bodybuilder, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a different eating disorder, right? Like, you're eating
Mm-hmm.
on a schedule. You got everything weighed out. You're eating your broccoli, your fish, eat at 3 o'clock in the morning, eat at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're like asleep eating, but I know the schedule, right? So
Yes.
how did you break out of that?
Well, I think so. First and foremost, I think bodybuilding, I guess it's progressed quite a bit. I'd say as exercise and nutrition science has advanced, which I think in the last decade, it really has come such a long way. At least in terms of the nutrition interventions and what we prescribe to clients now, there is so much more flexibility. You may be familiar with the principles of flexible dieting, where instead of assigning meal plans and rigid restrictive food groups, good and bad, like that very dichotomous relationship with food, there's so much more flexibility. So I would say that my experiences as a physique competitor or bikini competitor were generally quite positive. I didn't ever feel like I was eliminating entire food groups, so that I couldn't have the highly palatable fun things. It was just, there was always a ceiling. We had a cap. So I never really got to intuitively eat, because of course when you're dieting for these competitions, there is an inherent element of hunger, and it's a sacrifice. So I think from a food flexibility perspective, I didn't find it too challenging. And thank gosh for, nutrition science, as that's what we kind of practice here at my clinic. But how did I kind of get out of that? I think I got to the point where I guess the pain of staying the same was greater than the pain of change. I think I felt like outside of the world of competing as a competitor, so even in my off seasons, I would go and do powerlifting. And I obviously had a sporting background. I loved feeling good. I loved being athletic. I liked, showing up in the world and being present and, able to be, involved in conversation and not distracted in thought. And I think so much of my time and energy, like mental energy, was spent thinking about food. And I just was so done with it. I felt like I was missing out on my life. I felt like conversations were happening and I wasn't even there. My physical body was, but it was just all consuming. And it got to the point, I think, where I was really unhappy in my relationship. I was probably 3 years into my marriage, and I think that was certainly contributing to my overall feelings of unhappiness. So collectively, not having done the work on my body image, my value, my self-worth, I just gotten to the place where I was so sad and so unhappy and felt so I lacked purpose, that just evoked change. I realized, like, I need to fix this. I am tired of the purging, the binging, the restriction, the excessive exercise cycle. And I was done with the hamster wheel, as you described it. So I had to make so many conscious, intentional decisions not to keep doing what I had been doing. And it was very uncomfortable. I know the first couple of years of going to therapy, and I mean, when I say I did therapy, it's not like, oh, once a month I would have a call with a professional. I was having therapy weekly, like every Thursday or whatever day it was that we'd organized my therapy sessions. I would have so much anxiety and just nervousness about the call, or what's the point? This is so, it's a waste of time. But, I'd show up and I do it, and I would always feel a little better after those sessions. I felt empowered to try something new. I had a goal, and I was determined to start feeling better. So I think to begin with, I don't really feel like I was making a whole lot of progress. I was listening, I was showing up, but I wasn't really doing the work that was necessary. And interestingly, I think I read a book called Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPera. That was many years ago now. And another one that I thought was interesting was More Than a Body by Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Lexi Kite. Both ladies are in the psychology field. They've done research and are clinicians. And I think just their whole emphasis on self-compassion and kindness and allowing yourself to make mistakes and not be perfect. It's that narrative that I didn't possess. I didn't have this, oh, it's okay if you're second best, or it's okay if you make mistakes, or it's okay if someone doesn't like you. These were just principles and narratives or beliefs that I did not hold. And I think so much of that was because of the way that I was raised. I think there was a lot of societal pressure placed on me by my family to perform well. There's a lot of impetus placed on, you will get recognition if you are a star athlete, or you'll get recognition if you are the best in your class and you get top grades. So it was very much, dependent upon how I performed, whether I got validation, and whether I received any love or, affection. So I think I just grew up, with this pretty tough mentality. And I realized I had no compassion for myself. So my own beliefs about how I thought I had to show up in the world were kind of keeping me stuck in this place of negativity and depression. And I didn't want to be that anymore. So I had to learn this whole new skill of being kind to yourself, forgiving yourself for mistakes, learning that your value is more than your performance or how you look or any of those things. And it's interesting because I think now, having kind of grown through that all, I still compete as a bodybuilder, but for very different reasons. And I'm also, whether I'm in season or off season, it's no longer about getting to the goal physique and now I feel validated, or that makes me a worthy person. I just like the challenge, like any other physical sport. The elitists of the elitists, they go to the Olympics because, they've got a goal. It requires physical, physical challenges, lots of discipline. I think those are really common to all sports. So this to me doesn't really feel a whole lot different, other than the fact that it's a lot harder because you restrict your calories a little bit. But it's the sense of accomplishment that you get afterwards. It's great, but it's not my identity anymore. I just enjoy that process. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but I mean, there are so many things that go into stepping away from having an eating disorder and getting off that hamster wheel.
Yeah, no, and thank you again for being so open, because if someone was to look at you, if I just met you today and I saw you in a gym, I'd be, wow, look at that girl. Oh, and not real. Everyone has a story, right? Everyone's fighting a battle we know nothing about. And people just make presumptions, right? Like you look at people in Hollywood too, right? Like, oh, they got it all together. Look, they got money, they got this, they don't have problems. But when you share, you just bring so many people together. So thank you for that. And it sounds like now, like, your bodybuilding is your therapy, right? And what I've learned, and you got to sit in the shit, man, right? And you got to feel the heel. And that's hard. That's hard. So I am in awe of you that you got to the other side, because that's where all of us want to go, but we're so scared. It's like being on they used the log analogy. You're in the water, you got the log, the waves are crashing in your face, you think you're going to die, you're holding on to the log, you can see an island, you can touch the island, but you don't know what's on the island. But you know the log, but the log's going to punch you in the face, right? So it's trying to get off the log to the island, and you did it.
Yeah, it's definitely a wonderful, wonderful feeling. I know also, like for me, I grew up agnostic. I don't know whether you have any listeners that are religious or spiritual or anything like that, but I didn't have any like strong foundational like beliefs as a young girl. I think I had good family with good values, but maybe kind of erred towards, societal pressures and wanting to fit in and go with the status quo. And I don't necessarily think that was the best environment to raise, a young girl. There's a lot of pressure to look a certain way and to be, perfect at all times. And I don't think that we're meant to be that way. We're all uniquely so different and individual. And, we're not all meant to be beautiful. We're not all meant to be, mathematicians. We're not all meant to be this, that, and the other. Insert whatever quality you admire. I think we all have inherently different qualities that makes us just perfectly imperfect. And I think when I started going to church, I don't know how I really found myself in church, but it was something that I had never experienced. And when I started listening to, all of the different scriptures when I would go to, the Sunday service, just the message was so overwhelmingly positive. And I kind of aspired to be and act in that, like in accordance with what was being preached, because it was something that I had never heard. So I do think that kind of stepping into a space of spirituality and accepting God into my life, and I don't know whether your listeners or not are have any of those same kind of common beliefs, but I know for me that was another really pivotal moment where I felt like my life served a greater purpose. There's something that I'm here and striving for, and this feels so fulfilling. Whereas previously, everything was so materialistic and extrinsic. There was nothing really from within. So I know that was another really important part of my experience, and it has and continues to be such a pivotal part in my day-to-day life. But yeah, I think lifting for me now is, and I mean, to a certain extent, it's always been something that I've wanted to do for my health. But I know my main motivators, the main drivers previously for me to, hop in the car and go to the gym were about burning calories and looking a certain way and fitting into a dress that was 10 years old and I knew it was never going to fit me again. But somehow I felt like I should still be able to do that, as a completely different set of circumstances, different, more matured body, changed body. So now my motivation is often outside of the competition that I would do. And I will say, right now I'm competing in the middle of kind of a series of shows. But when I step away from that, my motivations are, I think I should go to the gym today because I know I feel really good when I move my body. And sometimes I don't want to go to the gym. And instead of going to the gym, I might say, well, I know I'll feel better. I know it's good for my health to just go for a quick walk, but previously, if it wasn't the perfect, set of circumstances where I had exactly the right amount of time to train, or something had been shimmied around in my schedule that, made my day not run smoothly. It was the all or nothing mentality. And if it wasn't perfect, then I wouldn't do it. I think my approach has just softened a lot, and my motivations are wildly different. I want to live for a long time, and I want to be functional, and I do want to be strong. I want good health, and that is a thought that I had never really had, up until the point where I realized that, we can do things outside of its aesthetic benefit. So that was a huge, shift in my own narrative.
Being perfectly imperfect,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you with, EDs are an addiction, and the sooner you embrace that, the better off you're going to be. And part of 10 steps is finding a higher power, whatever that is for you, and it makes a huge difference. There's a reason why that program's been over 100 years and still going, right?
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. When I went into recovery, that's all I did was listen to motivational whoever, I don't care who was listening to me, I needed something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yeah, going for a walk is a great thing for your mental health. And going to the gym is a great thing for your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you have it um, for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, I've heard from a lot of people now that say like lifting is really good for people in ED recovery. It takes out the stress.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that? Or
Yeah,
am I like,
absolutely. I think there's quite a bit of research actually on the potential health benefits from resistance training specifically. So yeah, I'm a massive proponent. I mean, we certainly work with our clients here to help them get set up on a resistance training program if they've never done any lifting before. So yeah, I think it's empowering. I think people really feel, it's such a wonderful experience when you go into the gym and you are seeing your weights increase. There's a little bit of like self-accomplishment that it feels good. Not to mention the benefits that it can have, in every other facet of your life, from mental health to just your day-to-day, activities of living, like just feeling good, moving around. But, I don't think it has to be resistance training either. I think do movement that you enjoy. I encourage clients, if you like dancing and Zumba classes, and that you can consistently do, great. Go and do Zumba. If you like kickboxing, if you like going paddleboarding on the weekend, if you enjoy a slow walk, these are all great ways to move our body. It helps with our digestion. It helps keep you regular. And I think there is people who kind of tend to undervalue, just general movement, and its impact on our mental health. So yeah, I think do something that you love. It doesn't always have to be the perfect, 5 days a week of resistance training, which is often preached to people. I think we've got to find a balance that works for your schedule, your environment, the things that you enjoy. And then that will allow you to be consistent at it and remain healthy, for a really long time.
so, and I know you meant like weights go up, lifting weights, but I want to talk like scaled weight. I don't know how many eating disorder people that you've worked with or just you in general. How did you get over seeing the scale go up? Because that's most of our worst nightmare, right? Like, no. But
Yeah,
I
so it
understand it's
is.
part of the healing, right?
Yeah, so I think step number one is really, rather than looking at the scale, with a negative lens, just start by moving it towards neutral. So if you are somebody that has routinely or religiously weighed in daily, when you see that number go up, it normally evokes a certain emotion. It's obviously fear. It comes from a place of fear, worry, anxiety. Often it means, oh, does this mean that I'm gaining body fat? So I think to start by just moving the needle towards a weight neutral response. And that means if the weight goes down some days, I encourage people not to celebrate that, not to be, overly positive about it. Again, just try to have a neutral response, when you see that number. But beyond that, I think step number one, honestly, probably starts with education. And that is, what are all the variables that even influence my body weight? Because there are so many. And even as a dietitian, having gone to school for goodness, like 6 years, even in my first probably half decade of being a clinician, there were certain variables that I didn't even consider when I would look at my clients, weight trends over, the months that we would work together, and my own, of course. And I think recognizing that, and here are all the things that can influence that number that have nothing to do with body fat, starting off by just looking at your dietary fiber. If your dietary fiber consists one day of 25 grams, and then the next day it drops down to 10 grams, and then you weigh in the day after you've had a really low dietary fiber day, that number on the scale is going to show a pretty meaningful drop, anywhere in the measure of 1 to 3%. And that is just because that dietary fiber has a physical mass. It pulls, especially if you're eating soluble types of dietary fiber, it's very osmotic. It draws water into our body, into the digestive tract. That's going to make a pretty meaningful difference on the scale. So to recognize that works in both directions. So if you have a really high fiber day, looking at your foods that you've consumed and going, oh, wow, I went up by a kilo or a pound today. but I did eat twice as much fiber yesterday. So again, it allows you to make more of a logical, rational decision to that change on the scale. And then other things like your food choices in terms of their sodium content. So if you increase your sodium intake by by a measure of say 10% from one day to the next, you'll also see your weight on the scale increase probably by a measure of 1 to 3% of your current body weight. So if your food choices are changing from one day to the next, and maybe it's in response to binge restrict type behavior, again, that's another variable that will wildly skew your scale weight that again doesn't really have a whole lot to do with body fat. So again, when I talk to clients that are struggling with that, I'll say, well, now next time you see those numbers on the scale, you've now got a new, piece of information, a little bit of feedback where you can push back on that negative narrative. You can push back on the fear because you can now say, oh, objectively, I actually know that's got nothing to do with me gaining body fat, which is often the fear. So educating yourself on the foods that can influence that. And I also think your exercise from one day to the next too. So just because you have a schedule of maybe a run, some lifting, whatever sport you do, our day-to-day energy expenditure is never exactly the same. It's always a little bit different. And if your, Monday workout routine and just your incidental movement might afford, I don't know, let's say you burn 3,000 calories on that particular day. I'm just throwing out an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
But then the next day you are less active, or maybe the type of exercise you did was not as intense. So you didn't burn as many calories, and maybe you didn't run as many errands that day. You were a little bit more sedentary. And your energy expenditure goes down by, say, 500 to 1,000, which is not uncommon. I mean, we do all kinds of things every day. So just that change as well has the potential to, again, move our body weight just day to day by a pretty significant amount. So again, I try to encourage people to look at those variables. Also, if you do a more vigorous new exercise, we've got a new stimulus, that evokes, I guess, some general adaptations. And as that process is happening, it causes your body to have an immune response. So we have localized general inflammation in the muscle groups that we might have trained a little bit harder. And when we have inflammation, there is temporary water retention that happens as the neutrophils start kind of proliferating those areas that have been worked. So we might get a little bit more swollen in our quads if we did a really hard quad or a lower body workout. So even though that person may have burned a lot of calories in that day, and maybe they did a great job at being very mindful and diverse with their food choices and hitting their targets, if they have targets, of course, their weight on the scale the next day might be 3% higher because they've got this new stimulus. So again, the initial response is fear, worry. Oh my God, I've gained all this body fat. But now when we've got this knowledge, we can start to have a more logical response. The initial one is always likely to be fear, but then it's up to us to start pushing back on that belief and providing a more realistic, reason or justification for why my weight is changing all the time. Hot weather to cold weather. If you go in the sauna, if you're out of the sauna, again, there are just so many different things that can change your body weight. So I track all of those metrics with my clients, and I think it helps kind of give them a little bit of breathing room and to let go of that fear. And then obviously the next natural progression is, okay, well, why do we fear body weight gain in the first place? Let's say it was all body fat. Why does that scare you? And again, it often comes back to, their own insecurities about how they look, or that there is something that they're just not good enough, exactly how they are, even if they had a bit more body fat. So we have to start working through ways to change their beliefs about themselves. And that takes a long time, and it takes lots of intentional effort. I can't tell you the number of books that I read, the podcasts I listened to, the YouTube clips, the therapy time. It would have to be hundreds and hundreds of hours. And as difficult as that transition was, and I can say to you very hand on heart, I was so insecure. I was such a people pleaser. I never felt like I was good enough. I had zero confidence. That completely changed. And, now I'm just like, yeah, whatever. It's so freeing to be on the other side of, not having that negative thought or that pressure all the time. But I had to be the one to initiate letting go of all of that high, unrealistic standard that society has often created for us. So, yeah, I hope that that kind of gives some insight as to what I would do to get rid of that fear of the scale. So it does start very small. We continue to work and work and work on it.
I love you and I want to be your best friend. I love everything that you stand for. I love that you are like just so open with everything. I love it. And, you know, and thank you for saying it doesn't just come overnight. You got to work at stuff, right? And if you're not doing the work, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
You know,
I truly believe, I think when I was in my mid 20s, in the thick of depression, I mean, I was on antidepressants, I was getting therapy regularly. I honestly, and in my early teens too, I attempted suicide twice. So I was in the hospital, what's the word I'm looking for? Hospitalized
mental
for a
health.
little while. And, you know, I really, really struggled. And a lot of that is to do with like childhood trauma, things that I didn't realize, you know, then, but now as an older person, having done the work, worked with therapy, and we go back to look at your childhood, to look at your upbringing, like what are the things that even led to the eating disorder in the past? Because that is a symptom of something else. The eating disorder was a feeling of needing control when everything else in my life was feeling completely out of my control. So I know where it all started. But yeah, I think I kind of had to go back first before I could go forwards to get through that. But back to the depression, I really had to get myself out of that place by saying, I don't want to be here anymore. I have to change my thoughts. I have to be the one to do the work to like be a happier individual. And I think, as I was saying, I think I would wake up one day expecting things to be different. Like, oh, today I'm going to be happy. No, like if you're not doing anything proactively to enhance your mood, to enhance your life, you will stay exactly where you are. And I did that for years, probably 10, to be frank. And it was after 10 years of doing nothing, I was like, okay, I actually need to do the work. And like I said, such a valuable experience.
I adore you. I really, really, really do. And oh my gosh. So, oh my God, half an hour went so fast. I could talk to you for years or hours. Oh man, I hope you come back. You have such an interesting, loving story. I thank you so much. Where can we find you?
You can find me in a lot of places. I guess the place that I'm most active are YouTube. So I have a pretty awesome YouTube, if I don't say so myself. I do a lot of long form content. So it's just Holly T. Baxter. There is a lot of, I guess, science is at the forefront of everything that I talk about. I usually break down studies. I will talk about popular health subjects. I have shared so much of my own personal journey, which I think has allowed other people to kind of be a little bit more vulnerable in their space, in their world, to start talking about things that they're struggling with. So you can definitely go and get caught up on my life and how I have managed to kind of overcome my eating disorder and truly feel free of that. And then on Instagram, it's the same. It is just Holly T. Baxter. And you can check out all of our services. We have multiple different nutrition coaches, people working in the space for intuitive eating, mindful eating. We have coaches that work with women for menopause. We have coaches that work on athletic performance, physique sports, like I do. We cover a lot of stuff. And then we have a training app. I have books. We do challenges. I have products, all kinds of things. So, yeah.
Well, I definitely need you to come back because one of my questions was about menopause because I'm 40, going to be 46
Wow.
on Father's Day. And my friend and I were talking about it. She's 2 years older than me. And she's like, you know, this is getting harder to lose some weight, right? And I'm like, oh man, so now you have to come back.
We
Now
can talk all about hormones, but hey, I think a lot of it, before we go, I think a lot of it is about our lifestyle choices with aging too. I think we get a little bit more complacent. We want to live the luxury life. Our food choices may change. Our lifestyles change. So many of us have now got families and we just don't have the time that we did previously to do all the things that might facilitate a more, I guess, effective fat loss phase. And often I'll still push back on that and I'll say to clients, do you actually need to lose body fat? Is there like a health reason, or can we work on you feeling better, feeling confident in yourself through doing the work up here? Because there are many routes to Rome. And I think a lot of people don't want to do the psychological work. They're happy to do the physical labor, do the exercise, do the restriction, but then they completely neglect their mental health. And I honestly wish that if I could do my time again, I would go back to the 18-year-old version of myself. I would be getting therapy back then if I could. Like, knowing what I know now from doing that work has just been so imperative. So yeah, don't neglect that part.
I love therapy.
It's good.
I do.
We all need one.
It's great. Yeah, right. Everyone, that's the one thing I would change too. Everyone deserves, it's like going to the dentist. It's like going to the doctor. Everyone should see a therapist.
Definitely.
And if you can't, come talk to Holly, because she is like,
oh yeah, we can help. Our
Yoda around here.
Team can definitely leave you just feeling a happier person for sure.
Awesome. Well, you'll be hearing from me, that's for sure. So thank you so much, Holly. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for coming.
You are so welcome, Heather. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too, in sunny Florida and rainy Vancouver. Oh my gosh. I'm going to come visit you.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.